Is everybody worried about swine? I mean, the avian flu, or should I mention or think about it at all?
Well, don't think so.
No, I think
They're talking about that we need to be worried about what might happen. They're worried that it might mutate. 100 people have died. Out of 200 people in the whole world have contracted it.
Out of 6 billion people, 20 have died. Well, it's just like the swine flu. If people remember in the 70s, Rockefeller was our vice president, the owner of 5 pharmaceutical houses, and we paid his company $7 billion to make the swine flu. And I'd on or off a consumer advocate, and Dr. McBean, an MD from San Diego, filed suit against Ford, Rockefeller, and the federal government for buying and issuing those vaccines. And it got the news reporters at the polling places, because they were giving it to people free, with our tax dollars, $7 billion worth. 2,300 people died in the first week within 3 days of getting the vaccine. So it got shut down, and it's still in the vaults. So guess what's getting relabeled? A swine flu vaccine. And they resold it again. $8 billion we paid for it this time.
And of course it's preserved with mercury.
Oh, yeah.
And what is it?
Mercury and aluminum. And
Don't they, is it coming from this?
they haven't decided a name yet. I don't know. Well, it's Tamiflu. Tamiflu is what it's called.
Rumsfeld owns that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, he owns part of it.
Surprised he didn't turn it into a chemtrail.
Isn't it coming the birds are getting sick from those sprays too? That's why they call it avian flu.
Oh, no, that's a good
All
idea.
birds have a flu if they're raised in toxic environments.
Well, that's
Pigeons
toxic.
Pigeons have a lot of flu because they grew up in cities eating cooked bread and stuff like that. So they get a lot of, they don't utilize bacteria just like we do. We don't utilize bacteria as well. The contaminants in the food, the pesticides, the herbicides that are in food damage the bacteria on our bodies so that we can't cleanse ourselves in the normal process. So what happens, we have to resort to flus, which are viruses. Viruses are solvents, they're soaps that clean the body. So they don't reduce contamination, they spread contamination. So unless you have a very high, good diet, any kind of a viral detoxification is going to be difficult. So don't worry about avian flu. It's just another hoax to sell, to get us to spend $8 billion so they can stuff it in their pockets, which they did.
But if they spraying from the chemtrails, let's say, give an example, the birds are flying up, they're inhaling that spray.
Anything that causes pollution, is going to make birds and everybody else sick. So that's part of the damage that causes the bacteria and parasites to be destroyed. So we don't have the natural processes of cleansing. So in the last 3 weeks, I decided to do a heavy cleanse. Sulfur is a nutrient when it's high in a food to get some of the heavy metals out of the body. If you understand cancer, they say that when you're in the throes of cancer, beyond the 3rd stage, 4th stage, you'll start demineralizing your own tissue and your own bones. You'll start getting osteoporosis because your body needs so much calcium and the other minerals in a good balance to bind with those poisons. So since I had chemotherapy and radiation, and I still get experiences of detoxing about every 18 months to about 30 months, 34 months, I'll have a detox. So I thought, well, I've got a whole month in town, so I decided to do it. So I put a half a cup of milk in, a half a cup of honey and 2 quarts of milk, and I've been drinking that a day. And within a week of beginning that, I started getting all of these hives. It started crusting and turning black. and look at it under a microscope, you see I can see the different compounds that they use. They use mercurochrome during my stomach surgery. So that was coming out. I mean, I've got a black spot right here that just burned. I got a hole right in it right there. And, I do the scrapings and then look at it under a microscope. So I've got it coming out. Everywhere I got injections, on the butt, the arms, and then where they coated me with the mercury on the stomach during surgery.
That's your spot.
So,
Oh, wow.
Let's see.
but there were a lot of them. This is just one of them. And they will just pop out within a few hours. And if you understand mercury, which you it's going to be like a little bit. You understand what happens with mercury. If you go to the website of Toronto, Calgary University, they did a DVD, and they showed neurons growing and all dispersing and growing. It's a time-lapse photography. And then you drop a 2% solution of thimerosal into that, and then you see that the neurons just disintegrate. And that's what happens when it comes out through the skin or internally. It can cause, internal bleeding. It can cause many problems. Every vaccine contains 76,000 trillion molecules of mercury. Those that have mercury in them, it's 96% of all vaccines have thimerosal, which is mercury. So you can imagine how much of that is in your body if you've had a lot of vaccines, even tetanus shots, antibiotics like penicillin, all have mercury, aluminum, and formaldehyde. And that's just some of the base chemicals in them. The reason for that is people say, well, why did they do that? They put on it as a purification system and antibacterial. Like you put methylated mercurochrome on yourself. Methylated mercurochrome or liquid mercury. Iodine is another one that will destroy things. It's very caustic and burns. So they use it because it shocks the body into trauma. Every animal that Pasteur injected died. He didn't have ever one in his laboratory survive a vaccine. Not one survived a vaccine. But there was so much potential for money in it, they decided to throw formaldehyde in there and see if it would stop the anaphylactic shock. Because when the body registered a sterilized or live bacterial disease in the quantity that's injected, it causes the body to think it's going to die. So people die in anaphylactic shock. Animals die from vaccines. They found that they put in either strychnine or formaldehyde, any other chemical, they would keep the person alive or the animal alive. It didn't go into anaphylactic shock. So it is all just to sell drugs. And there can never be any evidence that a person would have gotten a disease. However, we do have the critical evidence that the vaccines cause the very diseases and more diseases. If you look in Chapter D, Appendix D, in We Want to Live, my book We Want to Live, you'll see that the rate of polio in people with vaccines, the rates of polio went up to 400 and some percent after forced vaccination. And that's pretty critical. But there are 3 states that kept record of it in one city, Los Angeles. And they were told to stop keeping record. They were ordered to stop keeping record because they didn't want that information out. So, vaccines are very, very deadly, toxic substances that will give you no benefit.
Why did they do it?
Money.
That's all.
That's all it is. That's all it is. Money.
Ask for donations.
Pardon?
Just ask for donations.
What did you call it?
It's also a way to annihilate welfare people. I mean,
Annihilate is what?
they kill. They gave it to the World Health Organization and the country of the country of Britain, United Kingdom, and the United States paid for and gave 75 million vaccines of smallpox to Africans. Guess what happened to those 75 million people? 80% of them came down with AIDS. So it was a way for genocide.
In Africa?
In Africa.
Yeah.
So it's a way to, it's another type of war where they can take the resources of a country and rob them. And they don't have to use all those big military things. And what they did was those countries that had that kind of disease, that high rate of disease, the World Health Organization, with the funding from Britain and the United States, went in and said, oh, we'll give you all of this money and support, but we need this as collateral. They're natural resources.
Right. They gave them money to get the resources and get them sick.
They gave them money to treat the AIDS with Western medicine.
Which they had given them in the first place.
That's what gave them to them in the first place. So here, these African countries, not knowing any better, not having the science that we do, said, oh, we accept your help. But when they accepted the help, the collateral was the resources and their government. So now the World Health Organization is set up puppet governments through the U.S. and in the United Kingdom, and we're running those countries and all the resources. Just 2 years ago in, what was it, Colombia? No, not Colombia. There was a South American country where they did that and they got the water resources. So nobody was allowed to even collect rainwater because this company that funded the country owned all the water rights. You could not even collect rainwater. So the people rebelled. They started killing the government. And within 6 months, they completely wiped out that company. The company was out of the country.
There was someone in America.
Yeah, it's in South America. Yeah. So you see what big business is doing. People are greedy, and they're going to use whatever tactics, and you're just like an ant to them. You're very expendable. They have no remorse about stepping on you.
The whole film Syriana was about that very
Yeah.
corporate greed.
Yes.
Well, the constant gardener too, about medicine.
Yeah, constant
getting
gardener.
getting
That's right.
people, knowing that.
And I think Oliver Stone is doing a film about that right now.
Another.
Don't you get vaccinated when you go to Thailand and stuff?
Well, no. The only time you have to get a vaccine is if you go into a jungle. So let's say you fly down to Peru or some other jungle where they say you have to take a yellow fever for the mosquito bite. All you have to do is don't tell them you went. Show no records of going into the jungle. You fly down to Quito or some big city in South America, and then you take the bus or a private excursion so your name doesn't show up as going into the jungle. Then when you come back, you're not required to do it.
As the natives,
Pardon?
as the natives travel.
Yes. The whole idea that infection comes from mosquitoes is pretty bizarre in the first place. A mosquito, it's a female who does it, and the female was about like 10 to 15 times larger than the male. The male eats bee pollen, and so does the female, and just like bees, they live like bees, only they don't store the honey, the nectar, or the bee pollen. That's what they eat, and they feed on the very, very tiny little flowers that the bees can't feed on, because the bees can't suspend themselves in those tiny little flowers. Really tiny little flowers. So that's what mosquitoes pollinate and eat. The female collects blood not for herself but for her offspring, the larva. So what she will do is collect the blood. She sticks her proboscis deep into the skin and bites every cell in the area. Makes a pool of blood, and then she'll suck it out. So she could destroy somewhere like 50 cells, just by biting them. And it's you saw Alien, where that thing comes out. It's got all those teeth in it. Well, at the end of the mosquito's proboscis, that's what it looks like, and it just starts chewing all of the surrounding cells so the blood pools. They suck it out. They take it back to the creek or the water pond, or even if it's a little water that's caught in a leaf on the ground, and that's where she's laid her offspring, the larva. Then she will just have a little bubble and put it in the bubble, and they swim up, and they just keep feeding out of that blood bubble in the water, and that's how the larvae eat. When she does it, she doesn't contaminate that blood. That blood's to feed her offspring. So if you think that there's some kind of filaria, as they claim, with elephantitis and malaria, it isn't. That's how they get you afraid, so that you can see, you imagine an enemy, and that enemy is the mosquito. But there's no evidence that you can get any kind of disease from mosquitoes. It is the diet, no matter what it is. And if you go down, they tell you to cook everything. When you go down there, they tell you to boil water, eat steam, or cook all of your vegetables. And it is a ludicrous process because you're more likely to get a disease, a detoxification. Example in point was in the mid-'80s, they made a movie, what was his name? Won the Academy Award for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, cinematographer. Anyway, he wrote and directed a movie called Latino. It was about our involvement in Nicaragua in the 80s. And it was bad on the American. And there were two soldier leads, and one of them was on my diet. And he brought this long list to me. It was about a legal-sized paper. And it was everything that he was not supposed to do. If you're going to take showers, use lots of soap. Dry yourself very well. If you can use distilled water for your shower, even better. Boil your water if you're not going to drink distilled. Distilled is best. Cook everything. If you're in the swamps, do not touch your face before you wash your hands. Take all of your clothes off and have them bleached and and heavily laundered before you wear them again. This whole list, I said, Tony, you do everything just the opposite it says, and you'll be fine. Drink the swamp water. Because Nicaragua is one of the great lakes of the Central American countries. It has more water per space area, so there's lots of swamp, as well as the lakes there. So, of course, during the shooting, they had to go through the swamps. So he was drinking the water, he was eating the raw meat in the restaurants. Out of all the 43 to 46 people who were in the crew, he was the only one who didn't get sick. Robert Beltran, who's the star, got so sick he lost 50 pounds, and they had to shut down the film for 5 weeks. Tony did not get sick. So, case in point. Okay, we're going to do questions and answers now. We're going to start over here with Jim.
All right. Anonymous person has been trying to get on the diet as an affliction, like where he took a medical drug. So now he's hooked on a medical drug, trying to get off the medical drug, which is, if he doesn't take it about every 3 days or something like that, then the whole thing just comes back in on extreme pain and all that.
What's the condition?
Gout.
Oh.
Yeah. And I finally gave up, and I took the pill that they recommend, and I started out, I took it intensively, and the big swelling went down, and, I got the thing under control, except now I'm on a drug, basically. And I've got to smooth out, I've got to get off the drug someday without,
So why didn't you go?
Well, I got your recommendation, but I was in the kitchen all the time with the pain formulas and the soaking in hot water and doing all this stuff.
Yeah, but maybe I've come up with something new.
Oh.
I found out that the calcium and sulfur in eggs and milk will chelate with the uric acid that causes gout. Gout is some people who eat cooked meat cannot discard the uric acid that accumulates, and that causes gout. So a good milk diet for about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, can get rid of it. A heavy egg diet, eating an egg every half an hour, eating 2 to 3 quarts of milk a day. All the foods with high sulfur can help pull out a lot of different chemicals and drugs in the system. So you might want to do a diet like that. Like for me to get rid of this, I've only been eating meat once a day, sometimes up to a pound at a time, but I usually eat 2 pounds a day, eating a pound once a day, twice a day. But right now I've just been eating 1 meat meal a day and drinking 2 quarts of milk with a half a cup of honey in it, and to detox and get rid of that toxicity. Half a cup of honey to 2 quarts of milk.
Throughout the day, not at once, right?
No, throughout the day. And I always warm the milk. I put it in a bowl of hot water, I take it out of my hot tub. My hot tub's warm, I'll put it out there. And it works a lot better, it helps relax the body.
And how many eggs?
Pardon?
How many eggs?
If you're doing one every half an hour, it could be up to 30, 40 a day. I've had up to 50 a day in my experiments.
What condition?
I'm just talking about gout. But there's a lot of conditions that can get rid of toxic metals and chemicals in the system. And the egg diet and the milk diet will do that.
No fruit?
Not a good idea. Well, an orange in the afternoon once in a while is okay. And you feel it. And a vegetable juice about once every 3 days if you're doing the eggs. You don't necessarily need it with the milk, but you will need it if you're eating a lot of eggs. About 8 to 16 ounces once every 3 days.
Sounds like a weight loss.
No. Well, if you're eating an egg every hour, that'll cause weight loss. But one every half an hour won't cause weight loss. No, it'll just stabilize it. It's very difficult to gain weight on eggs.
So the vegetable juice, just like
Cooked eggs gain weight quickly.
vegetable juice like every other day or every third day or something like that.
Yeah.
That's it. And then no other vegetables, period.
Correct.
And aloe vera juice, the same as vegetable juice?
Correct. But I did drink. Sometimes I drank when the mercury was coming out in huge spots. I had one come out this morning. I just felt it getting a little sensitive last night. And I've had many injections here, penicillin. And all of a sudden it felt like I had just gotten an injection. And the next morning I woke up and there was a huge head on it with a black center.
Wow.
All these white cells around it, black center. And it smelled just like the mercury, and under a microscope, that's what it was. It was mercury.
Can you tell that?
Yeah. So it, you can see it. It's a little hard to see when something is crystallized, but I caught this in mine now. They turn so quickly, I don't even get to see them, as far as when they're in the pustulation stage. This one, because it hurt so badly, before it came through the skin and burned my skin, I was able to arrest it before it got to the crystal state. But most of them come out as crystals, like you saw this one here. It just flaked off in all these crystals, black and dark brown crystals. And then, I had to crush them, mix them with distilled water before I can tell what they are. And still, because they're so conglomerated with all these other minerals and substances, it's difficult to distinguish what all compounds are in it. But this one was very easy to tell. Yes?
One time you said that don't have egg with milk. Well, how could you have 30 minutes and all that milk at the same time?
I didn't say. You said you do either an egg diet or you do a milk diet.
Oh, yeah.
But I say you can have milk and eggs together. I wasn't able to eat milk, eggs, and honey together for many, many years. I got stomach cramps. I could eat eggs and milk together, or I could eat honey and milk together, but never honey and eggs. Probably because of the surgery that I had had.
What did you call the cleanse you did for this condition?
I just called it a milk cleanse. A chemical cleanse.
So if I'm going to do this, how do you keep the honey from just being just solid honey at the bottom of the milk? I mean, it doesn't matter.
I take an 8-ounce jelly jar. I fill it halfway with milk, warm milk, halfway with the honey. I blend it and then pour it into the 2 quarts. I get these half-gallon glass jars. That's how I get my milk. And most people get the plastic. It's a good idea to remove it from the plastic and put it in the glass when you get it home if you're going to do that. But I get these half-gallon glass jars. My milk's in there, so I take some out and I'll drink a little bit, and then half a cup, and then put blend the half a cup of honey with a half a cup of milk, and then pour it into the half-gallon jar.
So one question about that is, so if he's doing all of this, is he still eating meat and other things too during the day? Or
Just one time.
Just
one meal, one meat meal a day.
With butter, right?
For 12 ounces?
Well, it depends. I was eating 2 cups at a time. Some people can just get by with 1 cup.
Butter, yes.
When we talked about this before, you said anytime I eat meat, I have to have an equal portion of fish. So I've been doing that, and that stays.
That's fine. Yep, that's your system. Yeah.
Okay.
But with butter, right?
Don't need butter with that.
You don't need a lukewarm.
Oh, and I add 2 to 3 ounces of cream, extra cream to the 2 quarts of milk. Make it a little richer.
But the luke formula we don't need.
I'll have the Luke formula sometimes. Not all the time. If I start now, see how this is turning all dry? Most of the toxins from injections come out the joints, the shoulder and mostly the elbow. And 2 weeks after I started doing the milk routine to get it out, see how dry I got? I haven't had this since I was in the hospital for surgery when I was 20 years old. And I forced it out to come out. Now it's just dry and scaly, Like when I had psoriasis, it was worse because there were open sores. This is just dry skin from chemical burn. And it itched when it came out. Itched terribly.
Put on the luke with extra cream,
Well, it would smother it, and I didn't want to smother and lock those chemicals in my body. So what I did was I coated myself with urine, and that stopped the itching. It stung, And if it started itching so badly, like when I used to have eczema and all kinds of problems when I was a kid taking a lot of medication, especially insulin. Insulin caused a lot of things like this. I would take Listerine and put it on my body. It would sting and burn so badly, at least it was better than itching to death, Well, I found that if you take white grapefruit and you rub that on, it'll do the same thing. It'll sting and stop the itching without preventing the chemicals from coming through the skin, without smothering the skin. Pardon? Lemon's too abrasive. You know how it marinates chicken and fish? You damage your skin pretty badly if you do that. I burned a hole in myself when I was experimenting with it. Actually burned a hole right through my flesh when I woke up the next day. I used lemon on one spot to break it down for 2 days in a row. And I wake up one morning, I had a hole in my body. And that was very painful. So lemon's not the thing to use, nor is lime.
How was the dating experience with the urine?
Oh, I did. I've been at home. You know, been at home. Like I said, I got 4 weeks at home without traveling, so I was going to take advantage of it.
The cider vinegar, is that?
Pardon?
The cider vinegar reduces the abrasive to the skin?
That'll also marinate your skin. So, but the grapefruit doesn't for some reason.
Or pineapple.
Pineapple would burn a hole right in your skin. The pain. I've tried everything, and grapefruit's the only thing I found that worked in a condition like that. Okay, do you have a question?
Can you reiterate the benefits? Okay.
I'm going to repeat it.
All right.
Go ahead.
Can you reiterate the benefits and use of coconut cream?
Okay. She wants me to reiterate the benefits of coconut cream, the uses and benefits.
The actual raw, that you get in the Beverly Hills Juice Company.
Right. Coconut means you take the hard, mature pulp of the coconut and you juice it. You separate the pulp from this cream. I'm not talking about the coconut milk or the coconut water, as it's called. I'm talking about the coconut cream. The white fat that comes, the fats and oils that come out of the meat of the coconut.
What's the oil then?
Yeah, it's coconut oil.
And that's squeezed out of the same white stuff?
That's fermented out of the white stuff. Or centrifugally spun. And the coconut cream, if I put it, see this piece of metal right here? These pieces of metal? If I put coconut cream on these, within an hour it turns gray. Starts ripping the metals off of these metallic substances off of metals. Very quickly starts dissolving them. So it's very good to dissolve a lot of different compounds in the body. Excellent for detoxification. But coconut cream can substitute for dairy cream and butter 15 to 20% only. But it is mainly solvent oriented. It does have some. Now the coconut oil does not. Coconut oil is purely an oil. It causes a lot of heat in the body. You can use it to, let's say, generate energy in the body to burn, to have energy to burn as fuel for energy and for heating the body. And for protecting the skin from the sun so you won't burn. Coconut oil is great for that. But coconut cream is very different. Coconut cream has a lot of water-soluble fats. Not just the oil-soluble fats that coconut oil has. And, 60 years ago, and even 50 years ago, about 90% of all soaps were made from coconut. They had a coconut base to them because they were great for cleansing. Shampoos, body soaps, everything had coconut in it. Laundry soaps, kitchen aids, they all had coconut in them. But you have to grow coconuts. You have to have people to cut them down because you can't have machines do it. So it's a people-oriented industry. It's a lot of work. So companies decided, we can make chemicals to do this. Not caring about what it does to your body and your skin, we can make these cleansers, these solvents, from unnatural substances that are poison. And we can make a lot more money. And that's why they shifted away from coconut. There are very few, there are still countries that use coconut, but they're not ours, and they're not Britain, unless they're specialty health food or health-minded stores or companies that will make coconut soaps available for you.
So you're saying coconut soaps are healthy to use if you can get them?
If you can get them naturally made.
Yeah.
That's just coconut It's coconut cream, not coconut oil. Coconut cream with lye, mixed with lye. That's how they used to make soap. Put lye like you do with cement, and that hardens the fat, dries it out. Then when it gets wet, it acts as a soap. And the lye will even help do that. But you just have to know to keep the lye down at a very minimal level. Just enough to dry the soap, to dry the coconut cream so it will harden. And when it gets wet, it lathers nicely and cleans nicely.
So the lye is not toxic?
The lye is toxic except when it's bound with the oils. Now they used to do it with, they'd even take pig lard. They used to make soaps out of any kind of fat. They would render it. Yeah. Wood ash was another way that they did it. Yeah, they would use the light woods, burn it, and use the ash so it would be light, and then they mixed it with some kind of fat to make soaps. But lye was the chemical way to do it, the industrial way. Put lime with it instead of ash. But ash, of course, would be probably a little bit healthier. But in my lab experiments with lye and oils, the lye doesn't get free. Once it's bound in the fat, it's locked in. So it doesn't. I've never seen it show evidence of absorption into the body.
Do you know where you can find like a recipe for making soap? I know that I've seen them before.
Just have to. Well, yeah, I think there's some on the internet. All you have to do is look around.
There's books in the library and stuff. I found books on how to make soap.
So coconut cream, when I'm giving it to somebody, as I suggested in my book, it goes before cilantro, something like that if you want to clean the heavy metals out of the body, let's say a tablespoon before a juice with cilantro in it. If you want to clean your system out, I'd recommend 2 to 3 to 4 ounces, depending upon your body size and weight, in the afternoon with some kind of fruit. If you're trying to get rid of heavy metals, dark berries and coconut cream are very good to help detoxify heavy metals that are in the glandular system. And those are already freed, loosed, and traveling in the blood and lymphatic system or neurological fluid. So that helps bind with it, dissolve it, neutralize it. But I always suggest that when you're having a large amount of coconut cream like that you also have at least 3/4 of a tablespoon of butter and about a tablespoon of dairy cream with it. So you have some animal fats to make sure you've got enough animal fats, your own fats, to bind with any kind of byproduct that would come from the coconut oil dissolving the metal to protect yourself.
So at the same time,
So you have like 3 tablespoons of coconut cream.
No, 2 to 3 ounces. 2 ounces is 4 tablespoons. So it's 2 to 4. Yeah, 2 to 4 ounces. So you're looking at 8 to 8 to 16 ounces, or 4 ounces times 2 is 8. 8 tablespoons. 4 to 8 tablespoons of coconut cream with a fruit.
I never said 8 tablespoons of food before.
Because you're not big enough. It'd be 4 for you, 4 or 5 max.
So you said 4 ounces are 2 tablespoons?
And like I said in the book, if you have banana with coconut cream, it helps dissolve hardened tissue like cirrhosis or sclerotic tissue for MS, anything like that. If you have any fibroids in your mammary glands or your vaginal area, coconut cream and banana help dissolve that. Not concentrated enough. The pulp, the cellulose will not free up enough for it to make a big difference. It'll work on a minuscule level, but we're too toxic to work on a minuscule level. Just won't see much progress. There would be some if you ate it, but it's not going to be anything like the concentrations of which I'm speaking.
If you're if you can use it with any fruit you desire, you've emphasized berries in the past.
That's just what I said. I said dark berries for heavy metals. The lighter metals like aluminum and iodine, using raspberries is good to eliminate. Raspberries and coconut cream helps eliminate that.
You use 4 tablespoons of coconut cream to 1 tablespoon of cow's milk.
Yes.
And 1 tablespoon of butter with that.
3/4. Well, it depends. I give people specific recipes. I'm giving you a general. When I give it to somebody, it's specific. I'll give them 3/4 of a tablespoon of butter, maybe a tablespoon and a half of cream, or a half a tablespoon of cream and a tablespoon and a half of butter. It depends upon their digestibility. But I'm just giving you a ballpark area to play with. A ballpark area that you won't hurt yourself during your detoxification. Okay? Do you have a question, Mike?
When you're floating in a small
Oh, let's all give Lucky a hand. He's our host.
When you're floating in the samadhi tanks and there's 800 pounds of salt in there and you get out of it, you're covered in this white brine. Does the skin absorb that salt? Or is it
Absolutely.
It does.
Absolutely. It'll cause a chelation. You have to understand the magnetics on your skin is pulling all these minerals out of your blood and lymph and everywhere. So it's dehydrating your system. Denutrient. It's not a good thing.
Don't float then.
If you float, don't put all that salt in it.
But you don't float.
What do
You can put salt water. Sea salt.
Get out of the ocean?
Yeah, you can put sea salt. You just take sea salt and put sea salt in it.
A little.
Yeah, you don't need much. What I do, when I used to use the float tanks, I would put a cup of vinegar in, and I would put about a half a cup of sea salt, sun-dried sea salt in it. That was still a lot of brine, but those float tanks, depending upon how long and big they are, they can hold a lot of gallons.
Where do you find those float tanks?
Well, I used to do them in Santa Monica.
They have them around the beach. But they're full of salt. They're 800 pounds of salt and 11 inches of water, but you float and you feel like you're in the womb. You don't hit
Yeah, well, what I would do is I would just float enough to where I didn't feel myself touching the bottom very much or barely touching, and that's, you have the same sensation.
Whereabouts is it?
Same sensation.
801 Ocean Floor.
Yeah. So I don't suggest that you go in that. You get your own and make your own. You can do that.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Liz?
Yes. I'm planning to go on a weight loss starting tomorrow. I'm wondering, do I leave out the formula for fruit and coconut cream if I am on a weight loss? That's the first part of
Good question. When you're on a weight loss, it's to remove the fats that are already chelated with a lot of poisons in your body. It's not to do more detoxification. So if you're going to eat foods that cause detoxification, your blood and your neurological system and your lymph are going to be too low in fat to protect you from damage. A lot of those toxins may go right into your cells and damage your RNA and DNA and the cells in general. So you do not want to eat detoxifying substances while you're on the weight loss.
Okay, yeah.
What's that mean? What kind of food is this?
Well, in the book I have the, you're eating eggs and meat
That's it.
and
Butter.
some honey and butter, a little bit of butter, very little bit of butter.
You changed your recipe. You told me pineapple, 4 tablespoons of pineapple, 4 tablespoons of egg. I don't know if that goes for anybody.
That's, Kathy, don't mention things that I give you because you're going to confuse people, okay?
I just thought you were going to say to me because you got the...
That's for you because you had a particular problem. I'm not going to go into that. That'll be your question if you want to ask it when we get to it.
I still have the floor. The second half of my question is how long should I do the weight loss this time around? What's your estimate?
Let me punch you in the stomach and see.
Before I leave.
It all depends. Usually when you go to weight loss and when you go a week with only losing a pound, you know your body doesn't want to lose anymore. And that's usually when you should stop. When you go a week and only lose a pound, that's stopping period. You're having very little honey and very little fat. But in the recipe book, I have the weight loss program in there. And it's mainly eggs and meat. It's basically just about it. And some juice. And some people, because you're eating very small amounts of meat during the day, like 2 to 3 golf ball sizes of meat, 3 or 4 times a week, 3 or 4 times a day, along with a little bit of butter or no butter, and then you're having some vegetable juice and you're eating raw eggs. It doesn't work for some people, but it works for about 80 to 85% of the people. The people it doesn't work for need to eat about an egg every hour, followed by a quarter of a teaspoon of honey butter mixture, equal portions of honey butter. So every hour, and I guarantee you everybody loses weight with that one. And have one meat meal a day, maybe a half a cup a day in the evening, and a cup of milk before you go to sleep, and a cup of milk at night, so you relax and feel better. Okay, do you have a question?
I picked up a parasite in Nepal.
You picked up a parasite where?
In Nepal.
In Nepal? Yeah. Do you like them?
Not at all. I hear I was very lucky to have it, but I didn't feel lucky. Really sick for over 4 weeks, nauseated, felt like I was going to throw up, diarrhea, and very weak, not able to eat any meat. And I ended up taking antibiotics for it. I tried to run it out at sports, but I'd like to know next time you go.
Lots of lime and lemon juice together. Equal parts of lime to lemon juice. Lime to honey. Lime and honey, equal portions of lime and honey. And that will pretty much destroy them. If you had a tapeworm or an intestinal fluke, which kind of did you have? Pardon? Everybody is Gerardia. So you don't get that from, that's an internal fluke. That's an internal fluke. That isn't a fluke that runs around in Nepal water. Although it does. It runs around water everywhere, all over the world. So it's doubtful you got it from there. It's probably just, it was time for you to detox because you were in a humid climate. And humidity causes lots of bacteria and parasites to become active in the body. That's why tropical areas have more parasites and more insects, because it breeds them. It's good weather for them. But that doesn't mean they are bad. I got my first parasite almost 2 years ago, and it was while I was in the jungles in Vietnam. And you don't get tapeworms, from the jungles. This is an internal thing. So I was delighted because that's my first one. I've been trying to get parasites. I've eaten so many different kinds of parasites and parasite-infested meats to get the tapeworms and to get parasites, but was never able to take hold because I had had so much chemotherapy and radiation in my body and other heavy metals from all the injections and medication that no bacteria and not much bacteria, and no parasite could ever feed on my body, because if it ate a cell, it would die. It was so poisoned. So I got my first one about 2 years ago. And, I was on the toilet constantly. And, I thought, oh my gosh, here, I get to really detoxify quickly. Maybe it'll help with that surgery that I had all that compound in there. So it was going to work on me and doing a pretty good job. Now, because of all that complex trouble that I had constipation since I was 2 years old. So every time I went to the bathroom, which was every 2 to 5 days, the first that came out would be the size of my fist. So, of course, it ripped my rectum. So I was bleeding every time I had a bowel movement, sometimes 4 1/4 to 1/2 cup of blood every time I had a bowel movement. So then when I went into a raw diet, I went almost every day, sometimes several times a day, but that first part out would be huge still. It would be like granite and just rip me. So even on this diet, I would move every day, sometimes several times a day, but always have bloody stools because of the tear. Once I got the tapeworm, it disappeared. So I was having nice, small, rounded ones. Biggest one was probably this big, and this was enjoyable having bowel movements for the first time in my life. So I loved that tapeworm. And all of a sudden, I got this craving. After about 3 weeks, I got this craving for an onion. And I just sat down and ate a half an onion. I don't like hot stuff. Burns all out of my tongue. And the next morning, I shot out that 47 feet of the tapeworm. I thought, oh no, my first friend, and I got rid of him, So then I saw little pieces of sections that were alive come out over the next few months, and I know I kept it. Then about 3 months after that period, I had another bowel movement and passed about 45 to 48 feet again, and that was it. Haven't seen him since, and that was over a year ago. A year and a half ago. No, but I don't have constipation anymore. Unless I eat cheese without butter and only milk, then I'll get constipated. But it'll still never get that big. It may get that big and still very dry, but never like granite like it used to. So that tapeworm restored an intestinal environment that I had desired for 58 years. So I start my 60th year tomorrow, folks. Trying to catch up with you, Roger. Just wait a minute. I'm just talking to Roger about his birthday. His age.
Happy birthday, Roger.
So, yes, I'll be 59 tomorrow.
Now that I've taken antibiotics, which I haven't had for many, many, many years, what can I do to help that?
You've destroyed your intestinal environment. You've destroyed the bacteria. You've destroyed E. coli. E. coli is responsible for the final stage of digestion. It is the bacteria that synthesizes most of the B vitamins, including vitamin B12 from meats. So if you wipe out the E. coli with enemas, with colonics, with antibiotics, you have reduced your immunity to everything and your strength and backup. So E. coli is very important. The E. coli also discharges in its what's called Vera toxins, enzymes which prevent and dissolve brain tumors. The trichinosis, the whipworm, that all humans used to have up to about 10,000 years ago, and many still had, the Africans still have them, produces 3 enzymes which prevent pancreatic cancer and one that prevents brain tumors. So we're finding out all these parasites are good for us, not bad for us. And we'd be a lot healthier. And all the animals and humans who have them are healthier in digestibility and digestion, everything. They do a lot better. So parasites are your friend. If, though, you are so toxic with the decaying tissue, without the poisons that, from pesticides and all of that will kill so many of them, you will be fed on by a lot of parasites. It's like third world children, the WHO, World Health Organization says, we're going to help these poor starving children in Ethiopia and everywhere. You know what they give them? They pay the cereal industry billions of dollars to give them shit, garbage, and denatured food. So these children eat these cereals, which are highly toxic, and most of them are fried. So what happens is you have all these acrylamides that build up. And with all these acrylamides, it poisons the children. So these get these tapeworms that try to reduce the sugar in the body, in the intestines, and that's what the tapeworms are eating. They're eating sugar-damaged cells and excess carbohydrate byproducts. So they are necessary. They're not causing the starvation of these children. They're putting little smoke screens up and saying, that's what's causing it, the tapeworms. No, it's the toxic food, non-food that they're being fed, they're causing them to disintegrate. The human body needs meat, milk, some kind of animal protein to sustain itself, especially tribes in Africa who that's what they've lived on for ages. They are not cereal-oriented individuals.
Yeah, Kellogg's is one of the biggest, and Purina.
Are there dangerous flesh-eating bacteria and parasites?
If you, like the children, their whole bodies are decaying because of this food substance that they're getting, then, of course, you can have parasites eat up your body. Let's say your liver is completely damaged, and a parasite goes in to help you clean it. Well, if the whole liver is bad, the whole liver is going to be eaten. Could. That's not a normal scenario, but it's a possibility. So you may have, 20 people out of 100 people die from it. That's not a lot of people, if you're looking at average. But it's still, that's a big chance, dying.
What about like that trend that you read into that in the West, especially in ponds, skeleton and damage the brain and other definitely parasites that damage the not?
Well, a lot of those are stories. The only one that I saw that was real was the one in South America that if you urinate in the rivers, a small fish will go up inside your penis or your vaginal area, your urethra, if you're urinating. And that, it locks itself in. It's called a silverfish. And it's a parasite. And it gets into areas where there's ammonia. It likes an ammonia environment. And it doesn't kill anybody, but it's a very painful one. Pardon? And it has to be removed in surgery because it locks itself in with all these spines. And it'll go in, and let's say it's this small when it goes in, and if you leave it for, let's say, a month, it can grow this long. And that wide instead of just, very, very thin. So it'll just keep bigger and getting bigger and bigger. So your penis may get bigger and bigger, but it's a painful experience.
What country was it?
South America, jungles, Amazon. I think the one that I actually saw was in Argentina. Yeah, well, if you're going, your orifice has to be open, and the only urethra is never open unless you're urinating. The rectum is never open unless you've gotten in after having anal sex, or you have a bowel movement. So that's not really a big problem. But if a female goes in nude and she's open, she's in trouble. One of those things. Do you have a question?
Yeah, in your second book, you talk about, you give like temperatures, like around 38 degrees or 45 degrees for about the coldest you ever want to have your food at. And I was kind of wondering, what happens to food exactly below that temperature? Like
it starts altering them. When it's frozen, it alters them critically.
So you lose the nutrients?
You lose some nutrients, absolutely.
Does it become toxic, food?
Well, it depends upon your digestion. Sometimes, let's say, if you can handle those byproducts from freezing, you will have some problems.
But it's not anything compared to like heating food?
No.
It's like a minor thing, so you lose a little bit of nutrients. It's not anything.
Well, let me put it this way. When I fed animals the same meat, part of it frozen, part of it cooked, one group frozen, the same meat, unfrozen and frozen, all the animals that ate, and that's all that I gave them, only the frozen meat. They didn't get any milk, they didn't get any dairy, they didn't get any dairy at all, and they didn't get any honey. And Nothing else. All they got was the frozen meat. The animals who ate it raw, no problems, all the way into 3 months. The dogs and cats who ate the meat frozen all got skin disease within 6 weeks.
Wow.
And then I took, to experiment that further, I gave them raw butter to help them heal, because butter goes to the skin pretty quickly, especially on carnivores. So I gave half of the group that were sick frozen butter, unfrozen butter. The ones that got the frozen butter took 3 to 5 times longer to heal.
You heal them while they were eating the frozen meat?
Mm-hmm.
Or stop eating the frozen?
I stopped feeding them frozen. I didn't feed them anything else but butter. That's all they got. That's all they got.
So if you kept your fridge, I usually keep mine at 45. I keep but if I kept it, let's say if it went down to 35 and nothing froze, would a significant amount of nutrients get lost? Yeah.
So 48 is the optimum temperature then? Well, I'm not raised up at low end.
It's low end.
48 low end.
48 low end. 45 is really the low end point where damage starts happening. But if you keep it at 48, you're likely, if you make a mistake, it's only 3 degrees. But the eggs and milk are damaged as soon as they go below 70 degrees.
Below 70?
Below 70. That's right. If I get milk straight from a cow and never chill it, I can use it like meat. It will help regenerate cells. Anytime that milk is chilled below 70 degrees, it loses its ability to help you regenerate cells. So we need to eat a lot more meat. It won't help you. It won't help you. It won't help you divide cells, but it will help you rebuild cells that are already alive. So meat is the only thing that can get it down to, 30, 45 degrees, 40 degrees, and it will still help you regenerate. But once it goes under about 36 degrees for meat, it's affected that way too.
But it is, right?
I would say, okay, if I flash freeze you when I thaw you out, will you do the work for me?
It's not like all the way frozen, it's just kind of like chilled so much that
Flash frozen means frozen to the core. It just means it's done so quickly that there hasn't... See, normally when something freezes slowly, it's like you will die slowly. Chemical changes will occur in your body. Okay? So if you freeze yourself quickly, you've prevented all of those chemical changes from happening while you're freezing. But when you thaw out, they're going to happen. That's ideal. That's ideal, yes. But still, we do the best we can, and it's a lot better than eating poison cooked food.
In East LA, people have cows that you want to buy them.
Pardon?
In East LA, can you go to Texas and buy fish?
Right, well, without even chilled.
Yeah.
Same thing in France.
Yeah.
I
don't know where, but I know people have cows in the backyard.
In East LA?
East LA?
Well, they have a lot of illegal Mexicans who have, and where they still allow chickens and some cows, like in Rio Hondo area, Whittier, not Whittier anymore, Whittier was outlawed it, but Rio Hondo and the surrounding areas, and some of them, it's illegal, they're not allowed to do it, but they do it, they keep it behind, and they sell it to other Mexicans or Central Americans who want it.
What's that,
Raw milk.
If you find any, let me know. Somebody's address.
They're very nervous with white people.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, I tried to get a regular connection with it, but it makes them so nervous. They're just waiting for somebody to bust them and deport them. So
Is your stuff supposed to be better?
Any item.
it's fresh. No refrigeration, so of course it's better. You have to sit and listen, sweetie. Okay? Roger, Kathy, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I noticed that my able to grow my nail, I never have been able to grow a nail and keep it without breaking.
Congratulations. Getting healthier every day. Now, do you have a question other than a comment?
Yeah, being tired, more or less.
Well, you're on a weight loss.
I know, but there's other days when I'm not on the weight loss. I wasn't, I'm still
Because that usually happens on a weight loss. Well, there are periods when you're going to get tired, and the lethargy is going to last quite a while if your body's in a healing mode. 90% of the healing happens in the sleep state, or in a very alpha state where you're very relaxed. You don't necessarily have to sleep, but most people's bodies have to go into sleep state so you can get your mind off of your worries and start using your nutrients for building cells and dividing cells rather than and rebuilding cells rather than worrying and anxiety. So most people do 90% of their healing in the sleep state. So that means a lot of rest and a lot of sleeping. If it's because of a protein deficiency, you just pick up put a little extra meat meal in there, maybe another half cup of meat in the afternoon, and if that charges you, you know that you need a little extra meat. If it doesn't charge you, you know that you need to sleep and rest more for healing. Okay? Roger, do you have a question? Always better to have a fat with any kind of fruit. Always. Remember, fruit, no matter what it is going to force detoxification. The tribes who don't eat cooked food like the Maasai, it's illegal to eat fruit because it detoxes. They don't need detoxing because they don't need anything polluted. And it causes the children and the people get erratic behavior. So they do not eat fruit, even in its green state. Other tribes will eat lots of green fruit. But and like I say in the book, anytime you eat fruit, you either have a hell of a load of fat in your stomach already, or you eat fat with it. And you don't have a hell of a lot of fat on your body. So you definitely need to eat fruit with it. I mean fat with the fruit. People say, well, you're pretty skinny. Well, I'm thin because I've been eating raw foods since 1972. So the fat molecules, when they're raw, are very small, very powerful, very concentrated. When you cook a fat, it swells 10 to 50 times its normal size. Guess what? Look at this, okay? I have a little bit, not much, tight legs, no fat anywhere appearing. Anywhere else but a little bit right here. You know what my body fat level is? Normally, what people, when they're men and they're my size, what do you think the fat level normally is? Pardon? That's right. 7 to 15%, usually 7 to 12%. I am 22% body fat.
Wow.
So I'm really bigger than he is if I had cooked fat molecules still in my body. I'd be about his size. He's about 22 to 27% body fat. Yeah. So that's what I would look at if I still had old, swollen fat, cooked fat molecules in my body.
They say you're supposed to be around that 70.
Athletes say that for performance.
Is that true?
It's not true at all.
I've got athletes who are, who take time, when they go on the diet, they take all this time off, and they gain 5 to 10% body fat. It's the quality of fat that's important. And the concentration. You can get so many more fat molecules into a small space if they're raw. And they burn easily. They're utilized easily. The body eats them easily to generate its energy. I don't know why they talk about burning it. There's no such thing as burning fat in the human body. Cells eat the fat, and they expend it in energy, so it's a waste product. So it's never really burning fat. We get that from locomotives, and burning fuel. But our bodies eat the fat, so it gives them the energy. And then they have a waste product, like urea and, fecal matter. Cells have the same thing. Okay, you don't, where is she? She gets 2, right? Okay. Do you have a question? Bert?
Oh, yeah. When you got at the stage where you might be utilizing fat or protein more, and I feel like I would perhaps also some toxic metals, perhaps a brand new type of engines, and constantly in a state of nervous irritation, particularly in the spine and in all the joints. Am I dying?
Well, it depends. You're very thin. So what happens when you have a toxin that gets freed and loosed from the system, mercury, lead, thallium, cadmium, no matter what it might be, if you don't have the fats to arrest it, it can damage cells in your body. And they will die. That's why I like people to be fat. I like people to be at least 20% body fat. At least 20%. I like sick people to be 30% body fat.
How would someone acquire that much fat and save their life?
That's a difficult one, It just depends. People can screw around and screw around and screw around until it's too late. They say, well, I'll do it when I can do it. And you've done that for years, Bert. I've known you for what, 6 years? 8 years? 8 years now. And many times you say, well, I can't do it right now. I just can't do it right now. And I kept telling you, Bert, there's going to be a time when it's too late. And I don't know what that's going to be. But I've seen some people, it's too late. Especially if they're skinny. If they're fat, I'll never say it's too late. If they're skinny, I've seen it too late. I've seen people drop off and die. Take, for example, Eleanor Van Winkle, that neuroscientist who spent her whole life, like almost 50 years, cataloging all of the compounds, the chemicals were in the brain and nervous system. She discovered this diet. She went on it. She did research with it, backed up a lot of my findings. And she went on the internet and sent a letter to the New York Times about my work and diet and how she was able to prove it chemically. And she did very well. She was skinny as a beanpole, skinny as Twiggy was when Twiggy was 20 years old. She went on the diet, started gaining all this weight. And then somebody told her about Instincto diet. Instincto diet, you only eat what smells good to you. Well, how often does raw meat smell good to you? It doesn't. So these people eat 60 to 80% fruits. And they just start wiping the fat out of their body and demineralizing. She died 6 months after starting that diet. She lost all this weight. Eleanor Van Winkle. She was the one that wrote The Biology of Emotions.
And I saw Daniel at James, and he looks very thin and dry skin.
Yeah.
I couldn't recognize him. Lewis was there. No, Daniel came.
Daniel came.
My son tried eating all these fruit for a while, and recommended that he do that, and he feels to this day that did a lot of damage to his system.
Yep.
He's not eating meat. And cooked meat.
Who?
Daniel came.
Yep. Daniel went another way. But you get to see it. It's good because you get to see what it does.
Why didn't Kimberly recover? She was 100% wrong.
She never could gain enough weight.
Pretty good, pretty chunky.
No, she needed more weight. She had thallium all in her body. We're talking about a woman who was pretty skinny when she went on the diet, pretty sick, and she got breast cancer. She went on the diet very strictly, gained about 27 pounds. When you're that skinny, 27 pounds is okay.
Yeah.
She was probably, I don't know.
Like this girl here, isn't it?
No, she didn't get that. She didn't gain that much fat. I wish she had. Probably about 7 or 8 pounds less than you are. But she put it on compared to what she was.
Yeah, she did.
But she was stocky, she carried it thickly all over. And then when she started dissolving the tumors in her body, she started doing like all people who have cancer, that when it starts dissolving the dead cells in the body, the chemicals that are in those dead cells that have killed those cells, that have caused the accumulation of the dead cells, that is tumor and cancer, they dissolve with it, and you better have a lot of nutrients to handle that. Because you vomit, and you have diarrhea. And if you don't have enough fat on you, you will not catch up. You'll get behind. And it was just to the point where the breast cancer was going away. She did not, in fact, 2 weeks before she died, all the breast cancer had resolved. But it had gone to the liver. So her liver was highly contaminated. So I took one of her vomits and had to analyze $2,200 for one vomit, per vomit. And I had several of them analyzed. The head of the lab called me and said, somebody's poisoning your patient. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, she has 3,000 times the lethal dose of thallium in her vomit. And I said, she was a jewelry maker. She never used a mask and she never wore gloves. 7 years of inhaling burned thallium and all the other heavy metals and getting it into her skin, never using gloves. It absorbed into her liver and into her breast on the right side. It's too poisonous. She didn't have enough fat. If she had, let's say, another 10 pounds, she probably could have made it through the liver detoxification, like she did the breast detoxification. But it's too late for her. She just didn't gain enough weight. And she couldn't eat. When you're vomiting like that, you can't eat.
Oh, you have to do it way before.
It's got to be before that event. That's what I'm saying. That's why I say, and the weight loss in the book is just for women and men who are paranoid. They're not going to lose the fat. So I tell them every 6 months to do the weight and gain loss. Then after they do it for a year and a half or so, then they don't worry about not losing it because they see that they can lose it. So I'd like people to keep the fat on for 2.5 years before they lose it. That way if you go into a pneumonia or a meningitis, whether it's spinal or cerebral, you'll get through it easily if you have enough fat. And Bert, you just put it off all these years. You just kept telling me, I can't do it right now.
Well, I don't remember saying that to you. I remember that I'm available to you because of my work and travel.
No, you said I can't do that. I'm traveling. I can't do that. I can't eat that way. I'm in rehearsals. You've said that to me many times. And you also times you couldn't afford it. Yeah. So, I've heard that a lot from you over the years. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to force yourself. You have to deal with nausea. You have to deal with that. You have to force it down, just like I did after the poison mushroom.
I'm not having any more. I have no problem eating this diet.
Then eat. You have to eat a whole...
What I do have is a huge gallstone in the gallbladder. And I have some in the liver. And I know that part of digestion has to do with the bile and I just eat.
Well, the liver creates the bile. We have a gallbladder only when we were primitive. When we'd slaughter an animal, we'd eat sometimes 50 pounds in 2 days of meat with lots of fat and eat all the fat first.
Your liver cannot produce enough bile to digest that much fat in a 48 to 72-hour period. So the gallbladders, when we were primitive, and had to eat a tremendous amount of fat and meat at one time. The liver, as much meat, if you ate 2 pounds of meat with about probably a half a cup of butter a day with probably 2 dozen eggs, your liver, even if it has a stone in it, can produce enough bile to handle that much food. Correct, no. Your liver produces enough. It doesn't have to store it in the gallbladder. That's just a reserve. That's why people can have their gallbladders removed and there's no problem. Yes, the anesthesia might kill them. If they're made from soy chips and soy foods, no. They turn as hard as stone. And there's nothing I can do to dissolve it. Normally, you could take, some sparkling water, some lemon, some vinegar, and, some clay, and mix that together, and with some kind of, coconut cream or olive oil, and it'll break up stones. But when they're made from soy products, they're as hard as rock. Can't break them up. That's why James had to have, the bladder surgery. Because his stones, they had to blast his stones with more force than that surgeon had blasted anybody's before in his life. And this surgeon's not a young man. They had to blast with a laser his stones with 50 times more blast than they've ever had to utilize. And James was a vegetarian for 30 years. He lived on soy chips.
What's a soy chip?
Soy product.
Do you eat potato chips?
Yes, potato chips are made from soy and boiled in, fried in soy oil. It's like rock.
They're pushing that on even Whole Foods, a lot of soy products.
Absolutely. Big money. Big money. Do you have a question?
Very interesting, concerning everything.
A lot of watches have, stainless steel bands.
Stainless steel is fine. It's the radioactive battery that propels it. So you've got one that winds, the old style type. You wind it with the shaking of it. That's a good one. You've got a radioactive battery in batteries.
So most watches run on battery. In fact, now they have these atomic watches that are set by
That's right. You know how much radiations that put into your body? Tremendous amount. It's like wearing a low-dose cell phone on your wrist.
So it's better to have one of those. Like when I was a kid, I had a watch that when you move your wrist.
You move your wrist and they wind it. That's it. And they still have them. For people who are allergic to batteries, they still make those.
Mother used to stop watches all the time.
Yeah.
The batteries would die.
The cell phone is your best friend, brain cancer.
Yep. Well, they found last year the test came out from Switzerland that animals who were rats that were subjected to 40 minutes of radioactivity from a cell phone a day shrunk their brains by 30% in 1 year. 30% in 1 year.
What cell phone do you have?
I use an earbud. So when I have when you're on a call, whether you're receiving it or you initiate it, is when the radiation is blasting. So as long as you're not on a call, it's not going to be sending radiation into your body. So whenever I get a call, I've got an earplug and the phone goes somewhere else. I do not touch that phone.
Not in your pocket, because then it gets in your genitals.
It'll go right all through your hip bone and cause cancer down there.
But a speakerphone is like
Pardon?
the speakerphones.
Speakerphone would be fine too. You're not touching it.
What about those Bluetooth things? Those have batteries.
The what?
Bluetooth ones?
Bluetooth are nasty.
Do they have
Yep.
battery in between?
Right up into your head. It's not the battery, it's the radioactive signal.
So
Even a cordless phone, if it's over 900 megahertz, if it's a 2 gigahertz, your radiation level is a 4. So I don't even use a cordless phone in my house that's over 900 megahertz. Pardon? Under 900. And almost all of them are 2.2 to 2.5 gigahertz instead of megahertz. I bought a whole slew of them, and I have them in my storage, because they don't make the light ones anymore. You may find them on eBay or something like that. But you have to search. Or go to, Hong Kong and get them out of a, store out of Hong Kong, because they still have them in Hong Kong. I just bought something in Hong Kong that had low megahertz that they don't make in this country anymore, don't sell in this country, but they do sell in Asia. Do you have a question? Okay. Do you have a question?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm just new to all of this, so just a real general question. Denver. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Heard a lot of people talking about fruit and vegetables today, and eating that with the balance of meat. And I've heard you talking a lot about eating raw meat, which sounds fine. I just am more concerned with the ratio, and I'm sure that it's in the book, of the vegetables to meat. And I would always think that it would be more for the vegetable side than the meat. So I just want to a little bit understand as to why.
Because it's in the book, so I'm not going to go over it here. Yeah. But if you have a lot of vegetables, and I don't suggest that people eat whole vegetables, unless just a little bit of flavoring with some meat, no more than 2 tablespoons at a meal, and that's diced, not full concentrated. It'll over-alkalinize the intestines. When you're eating cooked meat, that's fine. You want to eat raw vegetable salad with a cooked meat meal, because you've got a high acid, and it's going to putrefy in your system. It's not going to move. It stops peristalsis. There's nothing to cause peristalsis in cooked meat. Raw meat there is. There's lots of enzymes, and it reacts with the hydrochloric acid. So you put an alkaline food in with an acid food, and you're going to neutralize the acid and alkaline. You're not going to digest either. And that's the problem.
What about vegetables?
Pardon? As long as you're not eating cooked foods, there's a lot of people that hit 80s, they're octogenarians, that don't produce hydrochloric acid because of their cooked diets. But even the Hunzas and the Maasai and the Samburu, who live, up to 150 years, they produce hydrochloric acid their entire lives. Yeah. Well, most of the worst attacks are the worst in your food. So if you can minimize all the damage, the rest of the toxicity in your environment, and survive pretty well if you're disciplined about your food. Very disciplined. Yes?
So how do we get roughage since we're not eating the vegetables?
Okay, I've been doing just a milk and a meat diet. I've been eating no fruit, except for maybe a little orange juice. So I eat no pulp. And I had 4 movements today, and 2 of them were this big. And I had probably about 2 pounds of fecal matter today. I didn't eat any pulp. That is all horse manure. You don't need it. We're a human system. We don't need that. We don't need bulk. Unless you're eating cooked food, yeah. Then you better have something to push it through.
Do you call tomatoes and bell peppers fruits or vegetables?
Fruits. What? Tomatoes? They're fruit. Tomatoes are
So
fruit.
They rot fat.
Pardon?
They rot fat. You eat them.
Tomatoes do it minimally.
And bell peppers.
Bell peppers will, because they're high in vitamin C, will burn fat. Also cause dental detoxification, so be careful with bell peppers.
Some of these people say that the human bodies that were natural fruitarians. What are they talking about?
They're theorizing from no experience. I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing. Your gorillas, every 28 days they'll eat 14 pounds in a 24-hour period of meat. So these people didn't observe them very well. Most of your monkeys all eat meat. Even the chimpanzee. The only monkeys that don't eat much meat are the killer monkeys. What they do is they go on a fruit binge. They'll eat all these fermented guavas or figs or overripe bananas, and they'll just binge for 24 hours, and then they'll go on a killing spree for 24 hours. Hitler was a vegetarian, a die-hard-in-the-wool vegetarian. You saw what happened to his mind.
So is there a difference between like the animals like cows and such that are more vegetarian?
Yeah, I talk about that in the book. I describe the difference between the digestive tracts. Do you have a question?
Yeah. I'm doing a lot of dairy, but I don't recall reading very much about the goat milk as opposed to, I did read some, but as opposed to cow milk.
Well, like I said in the...
The portion of the protein and sugar that's in our different.
Not really.
Not enough.
In pasteurized milks, goat milk will be a little bit more digestible. But in raw, I prefer cow's milk because it has more fat in it. And the fats are a little bit more concentrated. Goat's milk has a lot of adrenaline precursors. So if you're sluggish, if you're diabetic, goat's milk is a good thing. And you're very overweight. But if you're underweight or very sick, cow's milk is the way to go. Much more nourishing. If you feed a thin person goat's milk, they're likely to get hyper and lose more weight, not be able to gain weight.
I've been losing weight on this diet, not intentionally, I just haven't been hungry and whatever. But it sounds like I ought to stop doing that.
Well, you may want to take off 10 pounds of the old toxic fat and put on the good fat. That's what I suggest people do. And so a lot of people will do it when they get on the diet. They'll lose weight, and all of a sudden, once they lose it, then they start getting fat with the good fat. And that's the fat you want to retain to protect you. Because the old fats won't protect you as well. They will protect you. Give you an example. Like Friday, I leave for Asheville, North Carolina. I go there about once a year. And there's a community called Earth Haven there. It's a group of old-time vegetarians. We're talking old-time vegetarians. Some of them are 70 years old. Old hippies from the 60s, And that's almost about 60% to 70% of this community is old-time hippies that have been vegetarians long-term. We're talking 25, 35 years as vegetarians. Sickest group of people I've seen. And another side to that is that 50% of my cancer patients were long-term vegetarian. Anyway, this group, they're all hippies, and that's the type that's there. And all of a sudden, about 2 years ago, a fellow who looked like he came out of a motorcycle gang came in for a private consult. Pardon? Yeah. So, it was after the workshop, and the next day when I see patients, the next few days, and he was one of the people who had signed up for a private consult. And he was probably maybe 20 pounds overweight, 23 max. And so he wasn't skinny. He was, not quite as large as you are, but close. And but he had all this thick skin that it could drug damaged and alcohol damaged. And I photographed his irises and looked at him, and his glands and his organs were, very clean. And he's like, 48, 50 years old, something like that. And I could see all the drug damage and alcohol damage to his skin, and I said, I know you've used drugs and alcohol for at least 25, 30 years. He said 30. And I said, I don't understand it. I've never seen anybody this clean yet have skin like yours. You're just not that fat. He said, 4 months ago, before I went on your diet, I was 300 pounds. So here he had all this fat, even though it was bad fat, he had enough of it to protect him from all of those years of drug damage, his organs and glands, but not his skin and lymph. So even the toxic fats is protective. So when anybody gets after anybody who's fat, I said, that person's better off than you, this skinny. And put them in their place, because they ridicule people who are fat, and they're much better off. You should be happy, fat and happy.
These calorie restriction diets claim that
terrible.
They claim it promotes longevity. And there's a guy at UCLA, you've probably heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
And he's been advocating this for years, and and they've done experiments with rats and mice, which have, prove this out.
Yeah, but the rats and mice are not normal. They're using chemicals, and the animals will react differently than we are. And a lot of those animals are raised, a lot of them they use for laboratory when they want high resilience. They'll put them on their natural diet. And then they'll throw them off into these experiments and get a whole warped sense of what's going on.
Well, supposedly, though, that they divide them into two groups. And one group eats only one. And the other group, they're restricted 30 or 40% in their calorie intake.
Yeah, but you know what they're feeding those rats in the laboratory? I know what they're feeding. They're feeding them pellets. They're feeding them cooked foods.
Okay, so what? But the point is that the ones with the restricted diets live longer than those with less toxins.
If they lived outdoors, it wouldn't be that way. But living in a cage in a bad environment, it's depressing. It would make a big difference. Because a lot of, you know how fat people get depressed? There's a lot of fat people that get depressed because they don't get outside, they don't get in the fresh air, they don't move around. If they do, their whole psyche changes in the way they utilize nutrients. Some of your oldest living people are fat people.
And they can eat junk all day.
Pardon?
I mean, if they put on the wrong fat, it's...
No, what they're feeding, we're talking about rats.
Oh.
The rats are fed cooked processed pellets in the laboratories. They're not fed their normal diet.
I know, supposedly, both groups get exactly the same.
Doesn't make any difference. The only way you're going to know for sure is to let them overeat their normal diet. Well, it wouldn't even have to be in their natural environment, but that would give a better picture of what happens on the normal diet. Rats are omnivores. They'll eat almost everything, but they thrive on bugs and insects. They eat lots of cockroaches, so if they're fed good, healthy, bugs and creatures, and they ate more than another group, it wouldn't be a problem. Take the Fulani, for instance. The Fulani tribe lives 90% on dairy. To become a shaman or the leader of the Fulani tribe, you have to be the fattest person. You have to be the fattest male. So these males will eat nothing but gallons and gallons of milk a day, and at the end of that year, the fattest one becomes the chief or the shaman. And they live the longest. So you have to watch some of these tests.
Milk makes you fat.
Pardon?
Milk makes you fat.
If you're eating 2-3 gallons a day. Oh yeah. Can you imagine? You're not allowed to move. You have to sit there in one spot and drink. Sometimes they drink 10 gallons a day. It's like the sumo wrestlers. Keep eating and eating to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
beating a pumpkin.
So my other question is about the status of it, like, did it be caused by heavy metals? And you're saying
If heavy metals are in that bursa, yes.
I know they're in my body.
Yeah. And they got stuck in your bursa. That's usually what causes it. Just give me a call. Do you have Abraham, do you have
I don't have a question, but can we comment?
okay?
Well, I have one question. You said I have 22% fat, but that's good.
Oh, you have more than, you probably have 22 to 25.
So it's a good fat.
Yeah, that's what we want, yeah.
My comment was about like what Kathy said about the nails and what you just talked about 2 minutes ago about living on American diet. I mean, for myself, not growing up in this country, and also, I mean, I got the results so fast
on this diet.
And also, a couple of friends, which one of them was very unhealthy, they're also from Iran. I asked them to drink milk. One was just milk and butter. In 2 days, she called me and said her nail, she had major bone problem, and it's gone in 2 days. Like what catches happened after 8 years. And another one who...
You said bone cancer she had?
No, she had nail problem and bone problem. In 2 days, she called me. Like, I gave her the milk on Saturday, she called me on Tuesday. She said, you saved my life. Other one was egg. She said after having 1 or 2 eggs, she had cut herself and the bleeding stopped right away. So I'm so happy that I didn't grow up with this.
In our society.
Yeah. Your eyes got better in a week. Like that when you first started?
Oh yeah, boy, 3 days. Yeah, 3 days after vision.
That's it.
Yeah, this is the worst country for the most adulterated foods. Even England won't allow the pesticides at the rate that we do. However, our government has overthrown the Chilean government and some other of the South American, Central American governments, and they're shipping all of the chemicals, pesticides that are bad here, and selling them to them and using them on them in their agriculture. And then those foods are coming back into the States.
I mean, we only go to a hospital, doctor when we break our leg. I mean, going to a doctor is like...
Everybody does it here, yeah. And they encourage you to go to a doctor if you have a snivel. Go get a medication or go to the doctor.
And before this time, when my eyes was getting weak, I was so ashamed of going to the doctor. So I wouldn't go to the doctor. I was just ashamed of it. It's like
different consciousness.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. I know when I was a kid, I was autistic. So there's not much I could complain about, and I was always sick. I was always in pain. And but in my family, you didn't complain unless you were dying. And you didn't complain. You still weren't allowed to complain if mom or dad saw you vomiting or shitting your pants or something like that. Then they would do something about it. Or my mom would, go push me and hurry up and do this. Like I had problems urinating from the time I can remember, and it would take me sometimes 3 to 5 minutes to urinate. Just wouldn't go. It's like old people, Well, I was that way since I was a child. So my mother always frustrated because she had to wait for me to urinate, so she was always hitting me. And sometimes she'd go to hit me and feel me in fever, and then she would all of a sudden become very kind and very heartfelt and start taking care of me. Insane behavior, but that's the kind of behavior it was. You didn't complain. They saw your ills. They saw you were ill, or that was it. You never say anything in my family. Pardon?
In similar family,
Yeah.
I only didn't go to school when I coughed, but I felt good when I was coughing. So I went to school then. The rest of the time I felt horrible, but I had to go to school because I couldn't see it.
Right. Crazy. Do you have a question, Abe?
Yeah, a comment and a question. I'm 3.5 years on program, and I'm at a point now where all the things that are toxic in my body are starting to leave, and my left hand has been one barometer used to determine how effective the program was. I'm now starting to get the pain of all the toxins that I had before I started the program. All this stuff's coming back and it's going away. And I had this area right here. It got dehydrated, it turned to leather, and for about 3 weeks. And now I feel the pain there. It's starting to rehydrate. And so this whole hand is starting to transform itself. So I thought I'd let you know that. Yeah, it's great.
Well, it takes 40 years to clean all the cells out of the body, toxicity out of the body. 40 years, according to Howell and Pottinger's work. Took 5 generations to get to healthy. 5 generations of cells is 7 to 7.5 years per entire body cell, especially the bones. So 5 times that's about 147 years.
Not bad.
I mean, we should be, 5 times that is 38 years, 37.5 years. So it takes about 40 years for us to clean out completely if we're 100%. Well, I've got another, 13 years to go, 16 years to go.
And then you'll be
I have another 16 years to go.
What does happen at that point? You become healthier or younger? Or?
Well, every day I get healthier. It's just it's going to take that long for me to have all the toxins out of my system. And you can still see the mercury from this incision and the injections, still coming out. And chemotherapy is just a barrage of poisonings, mass poisoning. An injection of vaccine, like I said, has 76,000 trillion molecules of mercury. How many injections have you gotten in your life? How many molecules of mercury are in your system? Some people are never going to get all the mercury out of their bodies. Kids are getting 128 shots by the time they're 16 years old in some states. Mandatory. It's a crime.
And Novocaine, all the numbers.
Yep.
And spotting blocks.
Yep. All that stuff adds up and adds up. So some people it's going to take longer than 40 years. Yes.
What about like DPAP? And he says that we regenerate all these cells within so many days, and we're brand new every
7 years.
It's all in his imagination. It has nothing to do with chemistry. He knows. You have to understand. He's an MD. He was only taught disease and chemicals, and not healthy chemicals, drugs. He was not taught chemistry, so he knows nothing about chemistry. If you look at the blood, it takes 60 days or 45 days to replace every cell in the blood. A lot of people think it takes 10 days. That's if your body is taking the spleen and using the blood out of the spleen, which is already built up. But if your body doesn't have the spleen, if the spleen's cut out, it takes 45 days to regenerate every cell in the blood. And it does it in the bone marrow. The bone marrow is a breeding ground for red and white blood cells. They divide there and become their own cells, grow up, go into the blood.
But if say you're 20, so you've been 20 years of eating the American diet, it take you 40 years to get out what you did in 20?
That's right. You'd be 60 years old.
Doing 100%.
Yep, doing 100%. But still, you have to look at it this way. You're getting better every day that you do it, because you're not adding toxins to your system. If you're adding toxins to your system, you're going to get worse. If you're adding good nutrients to your body every day, you keep adding to your health. So you have to look at it. You can't look at the end of the tunnel. You're not there. It's so far away, you're going to think, I'll never make it to the tunnel. You just have to be happy with your progress every day. And I certainly am. Yeah, if you want to have scars and go through what I do, but I'm not working very much for these past 3 weeks. I'm able to do it, but most people have to work. They have to function. I mean, I can't go around and scratching everything. See all these things that I have all over. I mean, I've got them all over the arms and here and here and here. And some all in here. I'm just going through this. I'm in the hot tub, and I put a urine on, and I can't do that. People can't do that if they have to work. So I'm taking my vacation doing this. So that will speed things up, but you have to pay the price. You have to have the time and the diamond inclination.
What about something like the sweat program?
The what?
Like the purification rundown sweat program for infused vitamins and
Very toxic. They're chemicals. They're just going to create more imbalances in the body. When the body puts a nutrient combination together, it's not just vitamin C or it's not just B vitamin 6. It's a whole conglomerate. You've got a whole array of B vitamins that always work together. You've got a whole conglomerate of bioflavonoids with the C, with fat, with vitamin A, with vitamin D. There's always that coupling of so many nutrients. And if you broke them down, you'd have at least 30 identifiable nutrients in each combination. And when you're taking a supplement, it is a die-hard, in-the-wool, concentrated substance. It's a chemical. It is not a balanced food substance. So your body's going to have to counterbalance itself. And it's going to do damage.
But if you can get out some really bad toxins and then counterbalance, there's going to be some damage.
Okay, let's take, for example, chelation therapy. People are toting that as the big, great thing. Now, when I've taken fecal matter and I've tested it, I say, okay, I should see lots of this toxin, plus the chemicals that they're taking, plus heavy metals in their feces and urine. I found 20%. You're saying it's evacuated. It's not even getting out what's already what they're drinking, or they're getting injected into them. That's not all leaving, and you're making these claims that it is. Oh, pigs did. Pigs did it, and they got rid of 90-some%. And I said, what pigs do you know? What pigs are you giving chelation therapy to? Did you have some LA policemen on your diet? So, that's about it. If humans are doing it, then they better be checking human feces and human urine and seeing what's happening. It doesn't happen. And what I see in iridology is all of those heavy metals leave the soft tissue and go into the bones, the connective tissue, and lymphatic system. And you see everybody who's had chelation therapy, within 7 years after, their skin gets thinner and thinner and thinner. Because those chemicals are coming and demineralizing their tissue. I remember the first person I watched go through chemotherapy in 1971 through 73. He did it because he had congestive arteries.
Chemo or chelation?
Chelation. Chelation therapy. Just say chemo. Chelation therapy. His skin thinned out in that 3 years. It was like just paper pink thin. And he was dead 6 months later.
Can you thicken it up again?
There's no way. You've got all those chemicals that are constantly leaving the body.
What about things?
They are there to dissolve toxicity, right?
Yeah.
They're to break down the plaque. You think they're going to limit it
Well, then
to the arteries?
When they come out faster, they spread them out and stuff.
It's going to dissolve your tissues, your connective tissue and your skin. Even if you do that. There's only one doctor I know that's using fats with that therapy. And I haven't seen any good test results from even his stuff. But at least he's better on the track. In the late 70s, I was working with a lot of Scientologists, and they had a detox program for radiation. They take a lot of niacin and B vitamins and a lot of other supplements, and they get into sweats. Well, back in those days, they weren't using any fat. And I would see all these Scientologists, and these were great people. I loved every one of them that I ever met. They're the most rational group of people that I've ever met. I mean, more rational than anybody I've ever met as a group. And it's something about their clearing and how they adjust their psychology to narrow behavior. It'd be nice if we just do it, physiologically with diet. If we could do that, and that does help. but they've got trainings to help do that. But when they would get off of these these detox programs, they'd be all flush for a few weeks. Within 3 to 6 months, they were going into chronic fatigue. And I watched this year after year. So I got together with a lot of Scientologists and talked them into putting the fat. Now they're using olive oil. That wasn't my choice. My choice was to use raw butter and raw dairy cream. But we were having a lot of trouble with the milk commissioners at that time, so they settled for the olive oil. It works, but they're not using the kind of chemistry that they're using for chelation therapy. But I still see detriment physiologically from doing it. It helps, but like I say, anytime you're using vitamin C, niacin, it is a chemical. You're going to have imbalances and you're going to have damage.
So all that stuff you get compares to life extension places where they talk about all this golden releasing potions, all that stuff.
Who's the most famous scientist and teacher of life extension? Isn't it Gary Null? And what's the other fellow? You look at them, they're all dried up and skinny. And they're not happy people. And they're hyperactive and they can't sit still. Terrible, terrible system. They think that they can live on chemicals instead of food. And it's not healthy. Pardon? Gary Null, and there's another.
He's a vegetarian.
Yeah. And there's another one, he and his wife. The couple. Yeah, and they're both, they look like they're, dried up leather Zuby dolls.
Fit for life, are you talking about?
No. It's Dershot.
Life extension, yeah.
Yeah, Dershot.
There you go.
Yeah, they're promoting PhD.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah. Worst looking people I've ever seen. I mean, they're scary. Oh, in person. Those pictures are touched up. If you see them in person, they look like Zuni dolls that have been dried up in the desert for 40 years.
Well preserved.
Pardon?
Well preserved.
Yeah, that's what they look like. Pardon?
All life extension people look like that.
They've been on as long as those two, they do.
You know Lori from Northern California. She looks good. And it's all she lives on is that stuff. She tells me I'm going to die faster than she is.
We'll see.
We're having a race.
We'll see.
We'll see. Put money on it.
Tell her you'll leave everything to her, and she'll leave everything to you.
There's a deal.
Absolutely. You want to tell her put her money where her mouth is. The one who dies, the one who survives, is the one who gets the inheritance. I would do it. I'd do it in a flash with anybody. Unless I'm getting harassed and poisoned by the government. And I'm afraid to say it looks like it's happening. I've had my house broken into twice, nothing missing.
Where you're living
Nothing
now?
missing.
Where you're living now?
Yes.
How do they know
Broken
where you
into.
live?
They know.
I'm public.
You use a credit card.
I know where everybody lives.
Also, I've got my telephone number and a telephone.
Yeah.
How do you know they broke into it?
Because when I'm going away, just to make sure that nobody's in my house, and sometimes when I leave, you can take a piece of hair and you glue it, and nothing can break that if it's a certain type of hair, unless the door's been open, and twice it's been open, and nothing's missing. Computers, I can see, has been played with, so I know that they are starting to watch me.
You're a dangerous man. What are you going to do?
Well, I'll die if they kill me. That's all that'll happen. I'm just going to try to get all my work done in the next 2 years, so if I die, everybody will have everything that I know, or at least, everything that.
Why would you think that? If they break in, they can take you for. You have the right to write what you want.
They're watching all this.
That's why so did King, so did Kennedy.
Exactly.
They're going against the system.
They're also watching.
Not because of the chemtrail.
It's been since the chemtrail incident, since I got my face in that. So
I said they're watching all of us as well.
That's all your fault.
I doubt that they're watching.
You know, okay.
I mean,
they could.
you could just drop out now if you don't want to be part of it. Don't think, I don't want to be part of it.
Shit, I've faced death so many times. I'm not afraid of death. Death does not concern me. But while I'm alive, I want to be healthy. Okay, what time is it? What time is it? 5:10. We're over. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so about 6 years ago, I got fillings. Now they're not mercury fillings, they're like the white veneer, like healthy ones. I called them and I asked them what substance was in it, and it's called Herculite. You know, sounds great, doesn't it? I really want to go to the dentist to get it taken out of my body because I think it would be best to get it out. I just want to hear your opinion. Would it be best to get it out? And who do you know I could go to get it out? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the only people that I've ever seen regenerate dentine and tissue and their teeth didn't rot were under 22 years old, and they ate a tremendous amount of raw milk. Okay. Like 3 quarts a day. So it took them 3 years to repair one cavity in both of those people. How many are you going to have taken out?
I think 2, 3.
Mm-hmm. You're asking for trouble. Well, everybody else that I've seen who's done that and let the tooth exposed ended up with decaying, rotting teeth. It oxidizes. What I do is I keep having fillings, and they'll pop out after a year or 2, and they grow out. The filling will actually grow out because my tooth is filling in on the inside. And the dentist is amazed because when he goes in to put the new one in, it's a smaller area and he doesn't have to do any drilling anymore. But when I tested and left the filling out completely, the tooth oxidized and rotted and fell out of my mouth. This is the last one I tested, and it is doing the same thing. It's rotting.
What are you getting your teeth filled with?
Pardon?
What are you getting your teeth filled with?
Composite.
Any particular composite or anything else?
One that I'm biologically, not allergic to.
Right. You can get yourself tested.
Yeah.
You send it to Huntington's Institute, you send blood to them, and they'll tell you what filling materials your body's compatible with.
But don't they still have mercury and bad stuff in them?
There's so little in that. And when you've got an enamel, unless you've got rust in your mouth, it's not going to break down.
So if I just eat enough good of a diet, maybe a bunch of milk, like you said, then I can count on my tooth, maybe just pop it out, and then I don't have to worry about it?
If your body is regrowing and re-healing, it'll pop out on its own and then consider leaving it exposed.
Okay, so I don't really have to worry about that giving you the information I gave you about it really hurting my health then?
No.
Okay, cool.
Right. Okay, we did it, guys. She is having. I'm not going to be here because I'm going to be in Nashville.
We're doing a second rally that we're going to be having concerning it's under Senate Bill 517, I call it, and House Bill 2995. It goes under Experimental Weather Modification Program. It was introduced by Kay Hutchinson, a Texas Republican, on March 1st, 2005. So that's what we were seeing of the effects of in our skies, the chemicals that is being dispersed into our atmosphere, and we're breathing in these toxic elements and going in our soil. It's going on our food as well as animals. It affects the ecology in this atmosphere. So it's a very important issue which affects us all. So we're going to have a second rally. It's going to be held on Saturday, May 20th is our date, from 12 noon to 4. We're going to be meeting on the northwest lawn at the West LA Federal Building, which is going to be on the corner of Wilshire and Veteran. And you're not supposed to be parking in the West LA Federal Building parking lot, which you will be parking in is at lot 36, which is on the corner of Wilshire and Veteran. It's north of Wilshire.
You have a flyer?
And
a flyer?
I didn't bring it yet because I was thinking that I didn't know if you're going to be emailing. I'll call.
I'm not emailing again.
No.
It's too late. You need to do this way ahead of time.
No, I mean, you're going to
Anyway,
be going, well, you'll be coming back. When are you going?
I'm leaving Friday.
I can send it to you tomorrow. Or by tomorrow I could have it done.
I don't know if I'm going to have time.
When would be the last time? Thursday, maybe.
The last time was Friday, last Friday. I am so sorry.
Oh, I didn't hear from them till later.
Anyway, show up for the demonstration on Saturday, noon to 4. It's
This
a
is
very
not
important
April, it's May.
issue. May.
So you still have
May
time to
20th.
get it in, and then when you
Oh, I
come back.
think it was this weekend. Okay.
No,
May,
no.
okay.
We're looking at 4 weeks from now.
Okay, May, yes.
And we'll be having people bring signs, and we'll be on the corner of Wilshire and Veteran, and we're going to extend it well down to Sepulveda and Wilshire. So the cars can come out and see us from the 405 freeway, and we're going to gather a lot of people this way. Our last one was at downtown. We had about 50. Hopefully we'll get 100 to 200 people. And we'll be advertising on the web, blogging on the website.
It did make a difference. We were there. We didn't have a lot of people, but it did make a difference.
Right. Aajonus met in the office at Barbara
Boxer's
Boxer
office.
with Scott Stevens was there speaking, and we had an ex-Marine. We had
Meteorologist.
Rosalind spoke from Northern California Department of Agriculture. D.V. Kidd had run for Congress twice and lost. I spoke. Scott Stevens, an ex-weatherman from Idaho, spoke, and he left his job because he couldn't tell the truth. In Idaho, he's a weatherman. Was a weatherman.
Not the whole rally. Yeah, let's just give us quiet.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's
Okay. Jim also wanted to announce something too.
Okay. So Saturday, May 20th, from 12 noon to 4, West LA Federal.
So I just want to say I'm working on getting Aajonus' books known broadly using the internet. We have a website, We Want to Live, the 2 is the numeral 2, WeWantToLive.com. And one thing is testimonial. So if you're doing well, something goes well, you can just email Aajonus, and we'll collect these up, and they'll go on the site. Clave is well known throughout this site. We've got a lot of people. So anyway, that's all. Right.